Veronica. How are you doing?
Good, good. Glad to see you.
Yeah, you too. So, today we're going to talk about what are human rights and what are labor rights. Pretty tough question, I think, but a very important one.
Very important. Yes, if we want to work properly, very important question.
Yes, and also with regards to human rights legislation that's coming up, I've just been rereading the National Action Plan in Germany, and I feel like that the definition, or yeah, what human rights actually are, is a little bit is missing actually, and we need to spend a little bit of time to know what they are in order for companies to understand what they should be doing. So I
Exactly,
think
and what
it's
is expected from them. Absolutely.
exactly.
So for me, I mean, we have discussed, you and I, already about this. A very important piece of definition. For me, the one that is including everything is the Article 1 of the Universal Human Rights Declaration of 1948. I think
Mhm.
that article, that if you allow me, I can read it.
Yes.
It really summarizes a definition of human rights. And it says that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And it keeps reading that, but I will say we are born free and equal in dignity because we are endowed with reason and conscience. And then the article continues saying that we should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood, which is a good wish that I think we all have in mind, right? And what is interesting also that the preamble of this declaration, which by the way is a declaration, is not a convention or is not a law, is that already in the preamble, it identifies human rights as being the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world, which I
Mhm.
find also very important, right? Because it gives us the hint that without recognizing the intrinsic dignity of any human being, we will run the risk of avoiding freedom or justice and eventually peace in the world. So I think that those two elements, the fact that human rights are related to human nature,
Mhm.
already profiled as the definition. So basically, human rights will be inalienable, so they
Mhm.
are not for sale.
Yeah.
They are intrinsic to human dignity, and they are not recognized, or sorry, they are not granted, but actually they are recognized. So
Exactly. Yeah. So they cannot be granted or taken away. They just are part of. They exist because we exist, so to say. So as soon
Exactly.
as yeah.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that is vital. We should always keep it in
Yeah.
mind that because, particularly nowadays, we run the risk of thinking, oh, this right was granted to me.
Mhm.
But by the time we accept that as a reality, then we also accept the possibility that someone take away that right from us.
Right. Yeah. So are all the laws, maybe labor laws now, we make the switch, are all labor laws based on human rights since there's no, yeah, human rights laws? Not yet. I mean, now we're going into the business human rights law sphere, but are all labor rights based on human rights as the foundation or all rights in general?
I would say all right in general. So in our the way the legal systems in, at least in the West culture, and our democracies are built on and the foundations of human rights, on the foundations that human beings have intrinsic dignity, and from that, if you you start building the different legal rights. You start writing laws to protect that dignity. And as you say, labor rights will be one of that. Also, civil rights will be like that. Always keeping in mind that human intrinsic dignity. And the closer they are, because legal rights that are all negotiated. So in the case of labor rights, they will be the result of a negotiation between people to regulate the relationship between workers and employers. In the case of civil rights, will be the result of a negotiation, maybe to to regulate the relations within a family, or for example, or within different families. But they all based on this idea of human rights, of human intrinsic dignity.
Okay, yeah. And so how can we use this knowledge now into practice? Maybe we can just speak about a few things today.
Yeah. Actually, I think as CSR professionals, the way I try to use that knowledge, that split, is always try to keep the human dignity in focus, right? Because that will help me to understand the legitimacy of my demands. Let's imagine that I'm in negotiations with suppliers, and I'm trying to invite them to meet my expectations or my code of conduct, my standards. If I know this distinction that we just discussed, I will be more flexible and more understanding of the legitimacy of what I'm asking. And that will help me to prioritize, because I will say that if I have limited resources, I will try to prioritize the demands that are closer to protecting human dignity, and I will consider less relevant those that are farther from
the way. So let's talk about two examples. So you demand from your supplier that he works or she works 40 hours a week. And another demand could be that the supplier doesn't engage in modern slavery, for instance. Exactly. So how can we apply this human rights lens in this case?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, this is a very good example, because we know from the human rights lens perspective that nobody should be held a slave or in servitude. So if we see that a supplier is demanding their workers such an amount of hours of work that is getting into not respecting the human dignity of the workers, then I feel stronger in saying, no, certainly you cannot ask, I don't know, regularly 72 hours a week, because that is unacceptable in any means, regardless what the law says. Yeah. Whereas if I'm asking them to work 38 hours or 40 hours a week, because that is what is the law in my country, maybe I need to be mindful of the different cultures and the different situation of those countries, and understand that there is not such a magic number for what is working hours, although of course we have the ILO convention telling us that 48 and so on, right?
Yeah. So it's a good tool to use. And yeah, I think this could be a good start for how can companies, maybe a few more words, how can they start applying this lens? So what could they do? And then another question I had right now, how do they know that, let's say, I mean, how do they know that something is very close to human dignity? Do we just know it because we're
humans
and we have a feeling for it, or is there some tool that we can use to assess, or maybe it's to elaborate for this?
Yeah, well, I think the best tool is reading at least once the first 18 articles of the Universal Human Rights Declaration.
Yeah.
And if you read the preamble, even better.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you don't have the time, then I would definitely recommend to read the first 18, because those are the ones that are the closest to the human dignity, to the what is intrinsic to us.
Yeah.
Like is our right to life, liberty, our right to not be held a slave, our right to not be subject to torture and things like that. So I think a first glance at that will help us to put the compass on the right direction. And then about your question about what companies can do, I mean, Federica, I think we are open here at Pandora's box.
Yes, I agree.
A different lens, which is not what everybody else will say, right? And I think there are good reasons for telling, yeah, stick to the ILO convention, and that's the only thing that you need to do, which is okay, as long as we keep in mind that ILO conventions, as the name says, ILO is the labor and the International Labor Organization, are labor rights.
Yeah.
Which is great. That if we are when legislations are claiming or are asking companies should respect human rights, they should be clear in saying, as you said, what are human rights and what part of the arena you are referring to.
Yeah.
And I think companies need to really do this, or at least remain vigilant in what is going on with the legislations, and trying to join forces maybe for even do some policy exercise and getting that clarity from legislators.
Yeah.
The distinction between human rights and labor rights and what is expected from them. Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So I have three things that stick in my head that maybe we can take away, or maybe people could try out. So let's reread the Human Rights Declaration, because that's the basis of what human rights are, and we all need to get knowledgeable about what human rights are to fulfill the legislations that is coming. The second one is to use this human rights lens in helping us legitimize our demands to our suppliers. I think that's a great advice that you gave. And the third one, to help us prioritize what's important in our demands as well, or in the findings of an audit, etc. So having this human dignity element that we try to incorporate in our daily practice.
Yeah. I think you summarized it very well. But definitely more to come, because it's such a complex discussion.
Yes.
And with legislations coming, the EU directive as well coming.
Right.
We really need to be equipped and being able to give companies clear answers.
Yes,
because
I
they
agree.
have reasonable doubts.
Yeah.
And we need to be ready to answer those concerns.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm really excited to talk more with you about this topic in the future.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yes.
And subscribe to our channel.
Yes, please. Speak soon.